Namaste, I'm Dr. S.Padmapriya speaking. I have already covered many topics under Microeconomics of UGC Net Economics syllabus. Today I am proceeding to the lesson which is General Equilibrium Analysis. This is a very important topic under Microeconomics. The Walrasian Equilibrium. The most ambitious general equilibrium model was developed by the French economist Leon Walras, who lived between the years 1834 and 1910. In his book Elements of Pure Economics, or Éléments d'économie politique pure, the ideas were later absorbed by Wilfred Pareto. This theory explains the interdependence of prices of a competitive economy. In the Walrasian model, there are only two sectors of the competitive economy. They are the households and the firms. The households, as we all know, they sell resources to the firms. In other words, the households are those who are the custodians of the land, labor, and capital. So they sell their resources to the firms. At the same time, the firms sell their manufactured goods to the households. Walras argued that all prices and quantities in all markets are determined simultaneously through their interaction with one another. Walras used a system of simultaneous equations to describe the interaction of individual sellers and buyers in all markets. For example, he assumed that an economy consists of two consumers, A and B, who own two factors of production, capital and labor. Now, here we take capital as being represented by the letter K and labor as represented by the letter L. These factors are used by two firms to produce two commodities X and Y. This is a simple 2 into 2 general equilibrium model. It is assumed that each firm produces one commodity and every consumer buys the same quantity of both. In this model, we have the following unknown. Quantities demanded of X and Y by consumers, which is 2 into 2 is equal to 4. We have quantities demanded of capital and labor by consumers, which is 2 into 2 is equal to 4. Then we have quantity demanded of capital and labor by a firm, which is again 2 into 2, which is equal to 4. Then we have quantity supplied of capital and labor by firms is 2. Price of X and Y is 2. Price of capital and labor is equal to 2. So total number of unknowns is equal to 18. To find the unknowns, we have the following equations. Demand function of consumers is 2 into 2, which is equal to 4. Supply function of factors, which is 2 into 2 is equal to 4. Supply function of commodities, which is equal to 2. Clearing the market of commodities, which is equal to 2. Clearing the market of factors, which is 2 divided by 18. Total number of equations is 18. Since the number of equations is equal to the number of unknowns, one should think that a general equilibrium exists. Unfortunately, the equality of a number of equations and unknowns is neither a sufficient nor necessary condition for the existence of a solution. Existence, uniqueness, and stability of a system. Three problems arise in connection with the general equilibrium. The first question is, does a general equilibrium exist? 2. If the general equilibrium exists, is it unique? 3. If it exists, is it stable? Equilibrium exists when at a certain price, the quantity demanded is equal to quantity supplied. The quantity at which quantity demanded is equal to quantity supplied is equilibrium quantity. At such a price, there is neither excess demand nor excess supply. Thus, an equilibrium price can be defined as the price at which excess demand is equal to 0. The market is cleared and there is no excess demand. The equilibrium is stable if the demand function cuts the supply function from above. Excess demand drives prices up and excess supply drives prices down. Here we see that quantity is taken along the x-axis and price is taken along the y-axis. Supply is an upward sloping curve and demand is a downward sloping curve. The supply curve moves from left to right and the demand curve also moves from left to right, but it is downward sloping. Now, the equilibrium is stable if the demand function cuts the supply function from above. That is the point to be noted. Excess demand will drive prices up and excess supply will drive the prices down. Now, in the graph 7.2, we have unique and unstable equilibrium. If the demand function comes from above, there is unique but unstable equilibrium. That is, when the demand function comes from below, there is unique and unstable equilibrium, where excess supply drives prices and excess demand drives prices down. Existence problem. Now we have existence problem. Let us take this graph 7.3, where we have price taken along the y-axis and quantity demanded taken along the x-axis. Now here S is the supply curve and DD is the demand curve. The demand curve cuts the supply curve at 2 points Q and R. At point Q, equilibrium exists and is unstable. At point R, equilibrium exists and is stable. Graph 7.4. In this graph, we see there is no existence problem. Price is taken along y-axis and quantity is taken along the x-axis. S is the supply curve and D is the demand curve. Thus, the existence of equilibrium is related to the problem of whether the consumers and producers' behavior ensure that demand and supply curves intersect. The stability of equilibrium depends on the relationship between the slopes of demand and supply curves. The uniqueness of equilibrium is related to the slope of the excess demand function. So we have to understand clearly that when the existence of equilibrium is discussed, it is related to the problem of whether the consumers and producers' behavior ensure the demand and supply curves intersect. So the condition for equilibrium is the intersection of demand and supply curves, whereas the stability of equilibrium depends upon the relationship between the slopes of the demand and supply curves. The uniqueness of equilibrium is related to the slope of the excess demand function. Now, what are the assumptions of this Leon-Walras general equilibrium? He assumes there are only two substitute commodities X and Y which are produced by two perfectly competitive industries. There are two factors, capital and labor, which are supplied by two perfectly competitive markets. The production functions are continuous with the diminishing marginal rate of factor substitution. Then we have X industry is less capital intensive than Y industry. He makes the assumption that consumers want to maximize the level of satisfaction. He also assumes the assumption of perfect competition. He also assumes that the supply is initially in equilibrium in all markets. There is full employment of labor and other resources in the economy. The tastes and preferences of the consumers are assumed to be constant. Then we have consumption depending on the money income of the consumer, the price of the commodity, and the prices of all other goods. Now let us take this graph 7.5 and 7.6 discussing the commodity X. Here we see that when demand for commodity X increases, automatically demand for Y will decrease because X and Y are substitutes. Here we see in the graph 7.5 and the graph 7.6 that graph 7.5 is about the industry X, whereas the graph 7.6 is taking a particular firm in industry X. So in industry X, the entire industry, all the firms are present. There the supply curve and the demand curve S0 and D0, they intersect at point 1 and price is P1. Then we have S0 supply curve and D1. When demand increases, price rises to P2. But when the supply is also increasing simultaneously, we find that the price is brought back to P3 or it is getting adjusted. And here we see that MC, which is the marginal cost curve of the perfectly competitive firm. We have points 1, 2 and 3 and various quantities supplied at x1, x3 and x2. Now let us take graph 7.7 and 7.8. This is with reference to the commodity Y. Here again price is taken along the y-axis and quantity demanded is taken along the x-axis. Now here in graph 7.7 we deal with industry Y, and in graph 7.8 we deal with firm in industry Y. So since x and y are substitutes, one should expect the increase in the demand for x to be accompanied by a decrease in demand for y. The demand for y shifts to the left, price drops and the quantity of y decreases by y1, y0 units. In industry Y, the opposite happens. The fall in price of Y induces firms to decrease their quantity. In the long run, excess profits attract entry in industry X and induce exit of firms from industry Y. Entry and exit affect the demand for the factors of production. The expansion of production by existing firms and the entry of new firms in industry X lead to a demand for labor and capital, leading to an increase for industry X. Limitations of the general equilibrium theory. The main defects of the general equilibrium theory is that it is based on perfect competition in all markets, which is not true. Second, the model is very static. Third, the model does not provide an adequate and satisfactory explanation of what are the forces which lead to the establishment of general equilibrium in the economy. Thus, we come to the end of this chapter on general equilibrium. Thank you. You may refer to my other YouTube videos for various other topics of microeconomics, as well as introduction to economics. Thank you once again. Have a good day.